I think people don't realize the extent to the nonsense they were told during that period. But even after, in May 2024, in Nature, Ewan Callaway is the author of this publication. But there was a trial where they tried to infect SARS-CoV-2 into people, and they failed doing it. And they've done that multiple times previously. There's a 1968 public health report, and that was done by a bunch of agents of the Rockefellers. They were employed by the Rockefeller Foundation, and they were trying to infect people with influenza, and they failed as well. And then in the Spanish flu, they were trying to infect people with the flu, and they failed there as well. Even though they were like in a locked room, they rubbed spit in people's eyes and mouth and coughed in each other's faces, stuff like that. And you'd think if the virus theory was true, that would all have come to pass. But even with the Spanish flu, the most people affected during that period were young, healthy men who had just been in trenches, inhaling God knows what chemical warfare up their nose, and then and then it was presented as a pandemic again.
Well, even worse, they were given a barrage of what can only be called experimental vaccines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, the first place in the United States where the Great Flu occurred was on a military base in Kansas. And they said, oh, it must have been a recruit who got it from a pig who brought it. I mean, it's just, where were the guys dying? They were dying on the bases, and they were dying on the troop ships going over. So what happened right after they got on the bases, or right before they got on the ships? They were injected. And the level of non-science that was used in the conception, formulation, manufacture, and injection of these various things, they don't even know what they injected into these guys. It was like a free-for-all. There was no organized, and they didn't check for adverse reactions. They didn't record them. They just injected away. That's the Great Flu. By the way, the Great Flu was originally estimated, but the other thing too is there was a world war going on, and there was a complete and utter breakdown of basic infrastructure, including food distribution. People were starving, especially in Germany. There were over 300 recorded large-scale food riots in the country of Germany. When have you ever heard of a food riot anywhere, let alone a modern nation, let alone a major one? Well, that's how bad it was. So people were starving. They were freezing, because if you're not getting food, you're probably not getting fuel, right? So of course they were dying of respiratory problems, right? So calling that a flu is nonsense. But the original estimate was only 12 million. And then they did some post-whatever studies later, and they came up with 20 million. And then many decades later, they redid the studies without any evidence and came up with 50 million. And then they told the popular writers, the press and the book writers, call it between 50 and 100 million, because we don't really know. So yeah, if you consider an absolute hellstorm of misery over many, many years, yeah, I bet 12 million people would die of respiratory disease. But that got expanded, and that's part of the virus myth. And by the way, notice how they use the Great Flu against us all the time. Oh boy, the big one, it's lurking out there. We better be ready, because it could come out of again, this demonic force just comes out of the blue and attacks us. Medicine really has not improved much since the days of witch doctors.